Okay, good morning. We are Hilchos Treifos. We're finishing the kana and moving on to the lungs. Okay, Lamed Dalet today. We are in Seif Vav. Okay. Yesh Omrim she'im nikfa nekev mefulash mishnei tzedadeh אף על פי שאין בנקב אלא כדי שיכנוס בו איסר לרוחבו, דהיינו כאובי איסר אסורה. So we learned before all about a cut, right? Just a slice, or in either on one side of the kana, basically, and in either direction. We learned. We learned right now at this point. We learned horizontal. And you're cutting through one side, and the question is it more half or more than half? Now, we're talking about you have a hole that goes straight through from one side to the other side. So you're going through two walls, one side of the vessel through the other side of the vessel. So it's a nekev mefulash, right, from two sides. So then the shiur is smaller. It could be, when we said about the size of an isar, the area of an isar, so then that was the entire, the disc, right? When you're looking at a coin. And now you put it on its side. If it goes through and through, then you're just looking at from the side of how thick the coin is. Again, it's not exactly clear what that is, but that already is going to be enough to make it a treifa. And you just insert the coin, exactly. Kind of like a slot, like if you go to, payphones, there you go. I was going to say casino, but better to say payphone.
Because they use the fader at under thickness.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay. Whatever it is. Here it's the thickness and the length. You have to be able to put it through with the minimum area that it'll go through. Yeah. This is a little thickness and more length in either direction. Okay. Fine. Now, Zayin. Nistika kula leorka. Okay. So before we learned, you have a slice. It got cut horizontally, right? Along the round circles of the cartilage of the lung. Now, what if you go lengthwise? You get one long cut all the way from the top of the neck to the bottom of the neck, right? Let's say, for example, from the tabat hagadola, right, all the way, the cricoid cartilage going all the way down to where the lungs, right, where the lungs are. So then, if it's the entire length, asura. So if it's a long cut, right, the entire length, right, it's already going to be treifa. However, all you need is just a tiny little pinpoint amount that was not severed from the entire length. You can have much more than rove. Basically the entire trachea, except you have a little bit left, lamala ulamata, all the way from, and I hear the poskim point out, it has to be from even though we learned really it could be a drop higher than the tabat hagadola, mikardin, at least according to most, really you only have, here you have to have at least some of the tabat hagadola remaining. That's how, I think it's the Shach and others point out. Shevda Maharshal and others. So anyways, you have to make sure this long cut doesn't go beyond the Tabat HaGadola, and there's a little bit left. We learned I believe it's when you blow up the lungs, as much as the lungs go high, right, the animal takes a full breath of air, it goes up a little bit, and that's where your cutoff of the makom shchita of the trachea is. So you have to have a little bit there that's intact. Okay.
That's what you have to do with shchita.
B'makom hara'i l'shchita, which is the makom hara'i l'shchita. Keep reading. Kshera. So as long as you have a mashu here and there, it's okay. So the obvious question is, what's the difference? if you're going horizontal or vertical. Why should one be rov and not one is rov? So I think it's Rashi who explains in the Gemara. מפני שכל מה שהצוואר נמשך, הסדק סוגר, והולך, הילקח, הדר, חלים. So what does that mean? Because you have to imagine, we're talking about an animal. It moves and it extends its neck. So if you have a small slit in the trachea horizontally, and you pull on the trachea, right? You extend it. If you extend, like the animal extends its neck, it'll basically close up. But the minute that it reaches majority, then when you pull on it, it'll open it up, and the hole will get even bigger. So that's why, so it's likely to get more and more sick, and that's why it has a din of a treifa. If it goes by vertical, the whole length, even if it's kimat the entire length, except the two ends are intact, even if you pull on it, it'll still close on itself. And therefore, it's that's the difference that Rashi is given for the. In general, we say it's halacha lo moshe misine all the treifos, but okay.
So Vav was talking about a coin slot. That meant the horizontal coin slot. The vertical coin slot would.
Vertical. Well, the isar on its side could go in either direction. Could be in either direction.
So
because they're.
It's vertical. Why would we have the?
Oh, because in Vav it's missing. It's
so there has to be a missing.
A missing. Yeah. Exactly. Has to be missing. Okay. Good point. Very good point. Chet. Nikva lamata mimakom shchita b'mashehu treifa. So on the trachea, and we're going to see this again in the yud. If it's at the bottom, below the makom mashchita, if you have a mashehu of a hole, then it's a treifa. Okay, tet. Matzah gorgeret shenifsaka o chasera. You open up the animal, you see the trachea, and there is a hole, and it's either just a slice or it's missing. Ve'eno yadua imna semichayim, and you don't know if this was how it was before you shechted it, and now it turned it into a treifa. We're talking about a case where it's big enough to turn it into a treifa. And it's in the situation where you don't know if it happened during the shechita or before the shechita, such as maybe you cut it in two places. Now again, how relevant this is, we're going to see a little bit. The Ramah says Einan Bikin, and if it's a case where you cut twice, it could be an issue of Shia. We hold Shia even b'mashu. So anyways, this halacha is not so relevant necessarily, but it's not so relevant. Let's keep reading. So if you have a case, the Gemara talks about it with a couple different cases, different parts of the body. Basically, you shecht it, you open it up, and you see that there's a hole. So the question is, did this hole or slice happen before the shechita, making it a treifa, or it happened afterwards, either with your knife or just as you dissected it, it happened. So what do? Poska b'makom acher. Go a little bit lower down or somewhere else. And obviously, if we're comparing, you have to compare apples to apples. So then you puncture it somewhere nearby, and you take a look. Im heim shavim kshera v'im lav asura. If now that the animal is already dead, and when you do something to it, it looks exactly like it did before, then you assume it's the same scenario. And since right now it's after shechita, your suffix hole or a slice was after shechita, if it looks the same, and then therefore you just say, that means you assume it happened afterwards and it's a kshera. But if it looks different, then you would assume, why does it look different? Because one was alive and one was dead, and if it was when it was alive, then it turned it into a treifa. Ve'ein medamin ela michulya lechulya. And again, a couple explanations what this is, but basically, it means also it's in the picture. It basically means one is when you look at the trachea, once the dorsal and the ventral side look different, right? Ventral is the stomach side, the dorsal is the back side, and the ventral side is thicker, it's the whole cartilage. The dorsal side is where it's ritzua, basar, it's just a thin membrane. So basically, a chulya Michuya versus bar chuya to bar chuya, it just means the top half and the bottom half. That's all it means. Because they're different, you can't compare one to another.
Facing the back or facing the stomach. That's what bar is.
Exactly. Facing the back or facing the stomach. Chuya is, I'm not sure which is which. Whatever.
Is the hard part.
I think chuya is the hard part, without the hard
The
parts.
middle that holds it together.
Okay, I think it's right.
This
So
is
the
the picture showing.
okay, so then chuya is the ventral part.
This is a real colour though, because
Yeah, of course.
any nick would be different.
Well, so it depends. If it's, we're going to see. Keep that thought in mind, all right? Just remember, a veshet is b'mashu, a kana needs a certain amount, but generally rove. So anyway, so let's keep reading. So you can't compare. You could only compare two similar parts of the trachea. You can't compare two different parts of the trachea. So you could the top to the top and the bottom to the bottom, or ventral to ventral, dorsal to dorsal. Aval lo michuya lebar chuya v'lo mibar chuya lechuya, because they're different. Okay. Haga v'anu ein bekim b'dika. We don't really know how to do this so well. V'yesh lahatrif b'chol inyan. So we don't compare. If it looks like it may have happened before, that's what we have to say, and we call it a suffix treifa if you're not sure. V'chol dinim.
Is that ventral to dorsal issue? Based on the picture.
One's dorsal, one's ventral.
That means the chest versus the back.
Exactly. That's exactly what we're saying. That you can't compare from one to another, and they're different. One has a ritzuot basar and one is thick, and the two sides are thin of cartilage. V'chol dinim anu the nekeva v'chison v'regard hem dafka k'sheyadua shu machmat choli. Now, all these cases is we're talking about maybe because it got sick, and therefore it is the hole happened because it was sick. So then it depends what size, if it's a treifa or not a treifa. Aval im na'aseh machmat kotz o machat ledidan delo bekin b'bdikat haveshet treifa b'chol inyan. And when it comes to a veshet in particular, even a mashu, we never make any kind of checks. Even if it doesn't go through, we mentioned, if it's stuck inside with the kotz, we're already machmer. Shema nikev a veshet, maybe there's a hole, one little hole of a mashu and a veshet, and we hold that's a treifa. Delo gara me'ilu hiyat savar meluchlach bedam. It's no different than what we discussed before about having blood on it that we don't even check. Okay, let's go to Yud. Hakane besofo, kashenichnas tachat hachazeh mitpatzel. Okay, now, from the top of the throat, again, top in it's called, modern terminology of anatomy, it's called the cranial, because that's closer to where if you're standing up, that's where the head is, and caudal, where our tail is, that's lower down. And we just went over ventral, so we're going to see this again a few times when we get to the lungs, which we're entering right now in Yud. So now your trachea is going down to the lungs. And when it gets to the lungs, so it looks like, it doesn't, it looks like it splits into three. Mitpatzel, umisham yipared, v'haya, l'gimel rashim. In Parshas Bereishis it's Dalet, but here it's three. So here it breaks up into three vessels. So ha'echad note lelev, what you think when you first look at it, it might look a little bit like it's coming off of the trachea, but that's not part of the trachea. There's three tubes over here, and they're not the same. So one of them is an artery. It's a major artery, and it goes to the heart. So, and it pumps out of the heart through this artery. Ve'echad lekaved, and the other one is a vein that goes to the, right, that's definition, so it's going to go to the heart, and it comes out of the liver. Ve'echad l'reya, and the middle one is the trachea, and that goes right into the lung. Ushloshta nekuvin v'mashahu. If any one of these, right, this is from, you blow it up from the top of the top of the lungs, that's where it starts by the trachea. If you get one little hole anywhere in this area, it's b'mashahu, it turns it into a treifa. Haga, miu. Mekana halev shehu shuman sheyered min aruga tereya lelev regilin liot bo nekavim ktanim dakim. Now, when we dissect the animal, many times in this artery we see little holes. V'hainu rebiteu, and there's so many of them, and that's natural, and that's how it grows. V'lo mikre nekavim. These are not called holes. V'kasher, and it's kasher. What does it mean? It's not called holes. So in the Taz, Beis Yosef, he says, what are we referring to? These are lateral arteries that branch off from the main artery. And when you're dissecting the animal, they get ripped or severed. So what are you left with? Holes. And so these holes are really the remnants of the branches of the lateral arteries. So anyway, so it's whatever's normal, that's what's normal and that's kasher. But if you know your anatomy and you know what it's supposed to look like, and it doesn't look like that, it looks like you have other holes. So the shach, that's the shach, not the taz. The shach who points out that then it's a treif, obviously, because okay, fine. Let's go on. Let's start Lamed Hey at least. Siman Lamed Hey din Treifos Serea ve'uno teha. So the lungs and their lobes. Okay. Aleph. Re'ah shenikva treifa. If the lung has a puncture, has a hole, then it's a treifa. Finished. Okay. Now, if you look at the diagram, just so you know, it's real basic anatomy of a lung, at least for a cow or an animal. So you have your big lung is made up of, it's got, generally speaking, 5 or 6, we'll call it 6, smaller lobes, and those are basically called your caudal lobes. I think 5 or one of them is called the intermediary. I think the lobe, that's pretty much a little one right in the middle, and that's on the ventral side. That's on, facing, if you're looking at the ventral side, whatever, closest to the outward of the body. Then you're going to have 3 caudal lobes on the right side of the animal, right? It's the right of the animal, and it's not necessarily when you face the animal. We're going to see that in a minute. Depends how you hold the animal. So, but for the animal's sake, right? Or if you could, lie on the back of the animal and imagine yourself also. So the right side of the animal, there's supposed to be 3 upper lobes, smaller upper lobes. Those are the cranial. Sorry, I think I mixed that up. They're called cranial lobes because those are higher to the head. On the left side, you got 2 cranial lobes, and then there's one little one in the middle, and we're going to see the little one is called inututa de devarda, because it means the miniature lobe, and devarda like a vered, like a rose. So it's a little bit shaped, it's weak, it's red, as Rashi describes, right? That's where the name comes from. And on the bottom, you have 2 bigger lobes, one on each side, and those are the caudal lobes. Okay, so now let's look at it. Let's read.
There's 8 parts.
Correct. Altogether, there's 8. Yeah, typically there's 8 altogether, exactly.
Which of these pictures
There's,
are you looking at? Like this one?
yeah. Well, they're all the same. It just depends if you're looking from which, the front or back, ventral or dorsal, which direction you're looking at. But all the lungs are the same from the pictures, I believe.
You're saying there were 8, and Machaber says there are...
Well,
I see.
uni, so look, uni are the smaller cranial lobes, so there's 5, plus the middle one, turns it into 6. And then the 2 bottom ones are called the uma. So those are the caudal bigger lobes on the bottom. Okay, now let's read. Bet. Chamisha uni, there's 5 lobes. Perush ke'ein oznaim, a little bit like ears. Eat lireya, for a lung, sorry. Tlat mimina, 3 on the right side. Utrei mismala, and 2 on the left side. Now, I described it one way, it's easier for me, but he describes it a little bit differently. There's 2 ways to look at it. Behema tiluya beraglea. Flip the cow upside down, and it's hanging from its legs. And again, we sent a picture like that too. Ubenei, I think it's the last picture maybe. ובני מאיה כלפי הטבח, שאז ימין הבהמה וימין הטבח אחד. So if it's upside down and you flip it, then your right side is the animal's right side. If you think about it, it makes sense, it's true. But depends conceptually which way it's easier for you to imagine. So again, if you want to, normally if the cow is standing up, right, and you're looking at the cow, your right side is going to be his left side. Same thing, you look at a friend, you're opposite your friend, your right side corresponding straight across is going to be his left side. And then obviously if he flips around and you go stand behind him, then your right side will be his right side. So here you flip it upside down and you're facing the cow, but now it's flipped upside down. So your right side, your right hand, if you reach it out straight, is going to be touching the right side of the cow. I can show you afterwards.
Which way the head is there.
It is true. Yeah.
Yeah.
V'yeshla, it is true.
Down, but it's not facing you. It's
Because it's like a double mirror. It's a double reversal. I'll explain to you.
The legs are in front, the back, hindquarters.
V'yeshla od betzad yamin una achas ktana. Now, the extra middle lobe, it's a little lobe, and it's a little bit on the right side versus the left side. V'nikret inunisa devarda. De'ena omedet beseder ha'unot. And it's a little bit in its own location. Elo meruchakot mehem letzad panim. It's a little bit distant towards the ventral side. Right? It's more away from the spine. V'im chasera achas miyamin, if it's missing one of the three right ones, o mehasmol, two of the left ones, o shehayu shnayim yiminu shlosha mismol, or it's the number gets inverted, treifa, that's a treifa. Haga, surot ha'unot shel yamin ein adom l'shel small. Now, they don't look the same either. Again, if you look at the picture, each one has a little bit of a different name. It has I don't have to go into it, but you'll see each one has a little bit of a different name, both English terminology and also like a nickname in Hebrew in the pictures. So anyways, ein adomim l'shel small v'im nitchalef tzuratan treifa. So now, even if it just looks different, right? The positioning switches of how it's supposed to look. V'chein kisha'ona emtzait shel yamin gedola me'tachtona treifa. Or the middle one, which is really usually small, is much bigger than the top one, which is usually the bigger one. Ima una shel small elona gedola me'ona elona shel yamin treifa. Or the left one is bigger than the right one. The right one's usually bigger. Treifa also becomes treifa. V'chen Ima uma shel yamin gedola mishel small. Calls it v'chenima uma. Or now this is talking about the bottom lobes, right? Caudal bottom, the bigger ones. Now here the left one's usually bigger. So now here the big right one is bigger. It's another switch. Zeh mikre chalif utreifa. And all these differences turn it into a treifa. And the Shach just points out that the Ramah has a lot of additions from what's in the Tur and Shulchan Aruch. Basically, tzarach iyun shochet lemaisa for hefsid meruba situations. Okay. Now ve'avarda. Let's refinish here. Ve'avarda im chasera. Now, if this middle one, the little one, it's missing, or yimesh lashtayim, or there's two of them, or shadim tzet b'tzad small, or it's a little bit to the left side when it's usually on the right side, kshera. So that's okay. Haga. Elu nagula hatrif. But in our countries, the minhag is to say it's treif. Ben imtzu shnayim, whether there's two, or im chasera, or if it's missing, or sheshinta mikoma, or it moved its space, its location. V'hachi nahug, and that's the minhag. Kiyesh rabuta sovereign king, because that's what many of the poskim hold. V'ein l'shanos minhag, and that's the minhag. V'chein im shimta Torah v'tzorah taragila ba, and if it looks different than what's it's normal, all right, then it turns into a treifa. So you need a little bit of experience to know what's normal and what's not. Im nimtzeu ba shnei vradot v'yesh lahem shoresh echad ke'ovei etzba. Now what if you see two vrados? So we said it's a problem, but it starts out as one, and it's at least an etzba thick, 2 centimeters thick, or at the base, so then it's called one, even though it's mitzpatzel a little bit, it spreads out or splits into two. Alpha pi sheish bo sedek, even though it has like a split, kasher, it's still called one because it's connected by at least 2 centimeters, an ovi etzba at the base. Vim echad hafuch, if it's v'hasheni eno hafuch, if one is switched and the other one's not, or upside down, hochin achar yoter gdol, you go after the bigger one. V'im hi ena hafuch haksher, and if it's not flipped, then it's kasher. Havarda darkal yot bekis, normally there's a thin membrane sac that goes around it. V'im lo nimtza kis, and if there is no kis, or sheyesh la shni kisim, or it has two of them, or sheyesh la kis ve'eno menacha betocha, there is one, but it also goes out of it and escapes it, or it moves out of it. Even if you can put it in there, but then when you blow it up, it escapes. No, so all these dinim that are machmer on, it really only be machmer in a place where you're machmer. At the minhag is lahatrif. These are all chumras. Vishnei vrados, or if it has two, or ein la vrada, it doesn't have any klal. Aval b'makom shemachshir, in a place where it's machshir, gam elo chilikim yesh kshirin. All these little nuances that I mentioned, it's not in the Shulchan Aruch. It might be kosher, so you actually have to ask what's the local minhag. Im chaser miktas min vrada. Stop. If it has a missing part of it, yesh shidok ba'unot ba'uma mitzad small. In nimtza chaticha chasera yesh omrim the kasher. If it looks like part of it's missing, but really it's on the left side, some say it's still kosher. He can nimtza lefamim megadim u'talim, and that's common by certain chayos, animals, right, the small ones. V'chen, young ones. V'chen yesh machshirin, and some say it's kosher. Im yesh la tor vered b'shoresh shela ke'ovei etzba, as long as it looks like a vered in the initial base, alpha pi she'en la tor vered barosha, even though the rest of it doesn't look normal. Rak shalot hafucha, can't be flipped. V'lo shinta mekoma, and you can't move its place. V'chol dvarim yesh lahakel me'achar derabim machshirim b'chol inyan. And actually, many times we're making all these little nuances that I just mentioned.